Long before the Supertram was introduced, the city of Sheffield undertook a flirtation during the 1970s with the concept of a highly advanced monorail system, one that would operate across the heart of the city and provide frequent rapid transit between the train station and main urban centre. Though ultimately, due to political hesitancy and a mixed reception from the public, the system would never be built, and the city, even with its Supertram, still struggles with congestion to this day. The origins of the monorail begin with Sheffield's once sprawling electric tramway system that had first been established in the late 1800s and was one of the most extensive systems in the country at its peak, but during the post-war era would come to symbolize, like many traditional tramways, relics of a bygone age, being associated by urban planners with traffic disruption, outdated infrastructure and inefficiency. By the 1950s, the decline of the tram was almost inevitable, and local authorities, including Sheffield's, began dismantling routes and tearing up tracks, with steel rails being replaced with tarmac, and what had once been seen as a modern form of public transit was now dismissed as cumbersome and unattractive, with the final tram in Sheffield running in October 1960, bringing an end to an era that had lasted over 6 decades. The replacement system was, in essence, improvised, with the council leaning heavily on diesel buses, promoting them as a cost-effective and forward-thinking alternative, though in reality were messier, with buses lacking the capacity and reliability of the trams they had replaced, and as the city's population grew and car ownership surged, congestion quickly overwhelmed the narrow, winding streets of Sheffield. By the end of the 1960s, it was clear that something had to change, and with the bus network being no longer fit for purpose, both the Sheffield Metropolitan District Council and the national authorities were actively seeking innovative solutions to the mounting transport problems, with the government's Transport and Road Research Laboratory, at the national level, having begun funding exploratory work into advanced urban transit systems, reflecting a wider push to modernize how people moved around congested urban environments. With national research funding available and local demand for action increasing, the interests of both parties naturally aligned, and what began as speculative proposals, one of which involved an ambitious minicab network with fixed stations across the city, quickly ran into political opposition, with arguments breaking out over the location, cost and practicality of the minicab stations, and the idea fell apart before it could advance beyond paper. In the wake of that failure, a new and even more ambitious contender came forward with the Minitram, as during the early 1970s, monorails were becoming emblematic of a high-tech, forward-thinking future, appearing at international airports, world expos, and amusement parks, often symbolizing sleek efficiency and modern design, with these systems, typically driverless and elevated above street level, having the kind of space-age aesthetic that captured the public imagination. Sheffield, determined to position itself as a progressive city willing to embrace technological innovation, decided to investigate whether such a system could be adapted to suit the dense urban core of a British industrial centre, and the city sought proposals from 2 prominent engineering firms, ESAMS and Hawker Siddeley Dynamics, with both firms submitting competing concepts for a monorail-style system, with the architectural practice Robert Matthew Johnson Marshall being brought on board to develop visualizations and early design work. By the spring of 1974, the city was ready to present its vision to the public, and at an exhibition mounted on the 3rd floor of Cole Brothers Department Store, one of Sheffield's busiest shopping locations, this offered residents and visitors alike a chance to see the proposals up close, with the centerpiece being a model of the Minitram, a 2.5-kilometer elevated rail system, fully automated and driverless, running from Sheffield Station in the east of the city to a new terminus near Moorfoot at the southern end of the central district. The route would include 9 stops spaced at intervals through the busiest part of the city centre, replacing the popular but limited Clipper bus service, with the trains themselves being compact and frequent, designed to carry smaller groups of passengers in a higher turnover system, with artists' impressions showing the Minitram zipping above Shude Hill, skimming past the Town Hall, and gliding above Barker's Pool, Fargate, and other familiar city landmarks, with the most memorable image from the exhibition depicting a sleek Minitram crossing Castle Square directly over the iconic subterranean pedestrian roundabout known locally as the Hole in the Road. The system was marketed as nothing short of revolutionary, with promotional leaflets and public information displays describing the Minitram as a leap forward in urban mobility, a system that could carry up to 5,400 passengers per hour during peak times by coupling 3 units together, with each individual carriage accommodating 25 passengers, mostly standing, and would run at a cruise speed of up to 60 km per hour between stops. The infrastructure would be elevated, supported by slim concrete pylons, ensuring it could be slotted into the existing street layout without the need for widespread demolition. While more than just a single line, the project also hinted at future extensions beyond the initial loop, with planners floating the possibility of stretching the system out to suburban districts like Hillsborough and Heeley, or even to Rotherham and further afield via London Road, transforming the Minitram into a city-wide and potentially regional network. Initial public reaction was mixed but certainly curious. As for many, the display at Cole Brothers offered a glimpse of a radically different Sheffield, one that was more connected, more efficient and visibly more modern. But behind the scenes, cracks in the project's foundations have begun to appear, as although central government had agreed to fund the early design and feasibility stages, the burden of financing the full construction of the system was far less certain. Sheffield City Council, already wary of budget constraints, began to express concern that it would be left carrying the majority of the costs, while some members of the public and local businesses raised questions about the scheme's visual impact, its practicality, and whether the novelty of a monorail truly justified the price tag, with the integration of elevated track into an already crowded cityscape posing significant engineering challenges, and doubts lingered over whether the infrastructure could be delivered without substantial disruption. On May 22, 1975, the Minister for Transport formally announced the cancellation of the Minitram project, with the reasons including Britain being in the grip of economic turbulence, with inflation surging, industrial disputes common, and public sector budgets tightening across the board, and in that context, spending millions on an unproven experimental transit system in one northern city became politically untenable. Official statements pointed to escalating costs and the immaturity of the technology involved, noting that more development was needed before such systems could be considered viable for public transport on a national scale, and similarly to the Picc-Vic Tunnel in Manchester, which was another major project scrapped around the same time, the decision to axe the Minitram was considered a pragmatic though deeply disappointing decision. Following the project's quiet cancellation, the Sheffield Monorail quickly receded from public view, and it would be another 20 years before the city saw any form of new rail-based public transport in the form of the South Yorkshire Supertram system, which finally opened in 1994 and was in many ways a spiritual successor to the Minitram, though vastly different in design and execution. Unlike the elevated monorail, the Supertram operated at street level and was built to integrate more naturally with Sheffield's existing urban fabric, though this system too faced teething problems, with passenger numbers falling short of projections, and the scheme ran into financial trouble within a few years, leading in 1997 to the system being sold to the private bus operator Stagecoach, in the hope that the income of the sale would help generate short-term capital, though ultimately it did little to balance the books of a network that to this day continues to struggle with revenue and passenger numbers. Interestingly, at the time the Sheffield plans were being developed, Greater London Council was reported to have taken notice, reportedly commissioning a feasibility study for a similar system in Croydon, though this eventually came to nothing, while the only vaguely comparable project in Britain to ever materialise was the Birmingham Airport maglev, a short but modest link between the airport and its nearby train station. Operational between 1984 and 1995, it was the world's first low-speed commercial maglev service, but was decommissioned after just over a decade due to increasing costs and reliability issues due to its dated technology, and much like the Minitram, it served as a reminder of a period in which transport innovation often leapt ahead of infrastructure reality. Today, the Sheffield Monorail lives on through grainy mock-ups, archived brochures, and occasional resurfacing in nostalgia-fueled discussions, with some continuing to see it as a brave and imaginative project cut down by short-sighted politics, while others believe it was never the right fit for Sheffield's geography or needs. Regardless, much like Manchester's Picc-Vic Tunnel, the Sheffield Monorail has secured a place in the city's memory as one of the most defining what-if moments, a bold experiment that captured imaginations, stirred debate, and left behind a legacy not of steel and concrete, but of speculation and unfinished ambition.